There's a truth most men avoid facing, and it quietly destroys more relationships than people are willing to admit. A man can be hardworking, responsible, present for his family, and still find himself wondering why the connection with his partner feels off. Why she seems distant at times. Why the energy between them isn't what it used to be. And the confusing part is, on the surface, everything looks fine. Bills are being paid, responsibilities are handled, life is moving forward. From the outside, it looks like a solid relationship, but underneath that, something is missing. Something that isn't talked about openly, something that many people feel but don't always know how to express. Because here's the reality. Connection in a relationship isn't sustained by provision alone. It's not maintained by routine or by doing what's expected. It's built and strengthened through moments of closeness, attention, and intentional connection that go beyond the surface. And this is where many men get it wrong without even realizing it. They assume that once a relationship is established, once there's commitment, everything else will naturally fall into place. That effort in this area can be minimal or occasional. But connection doesn't work like that. It doesn't stay strong on autopilot. It requires awareness. It requires presence. What makes this even more important is that many women don't always speak up about it. Not because it doesn't matter, but because they've been conditioned to downplay it, to prioritize other things, or to avoid creating conflict. So instead of addressing it directly, they carry that dissatisfaction quietly. And over time, that silence creates distance. This isn't about doing more, it's about understanding what actually matters. Because when you begin to see this clearly, you realize that real connection isn't complicated, but it is intentional. And once you understand that, everything about how you approach your relationship starts to shift. There's a problem that exists in a lot of relationships, but almost nobody talks about it directly. Not because it isn't important, but because it's often pushed to the side, treated like something secondary compared to everything else life demands. Think about how most relationships are structured over time. The focus shifts quickly to responsibilities, work, finances, family, and daily pressures. These things matter, of course, they're necessary, but while all of that is being handled, something quieter begins to fade in the background: the emotional and physical connection. And the dangerous part is, it doesn't disappear suddenly, it fades slowly. So slowly that many people don't notice it until the distance is already there. A man might look at his relationship and feel like he's doing everything right. He's providing, he's showing up, he's handling his responsibilities. From his perspective, he's fulfilling his role. And in many ways, he is. But what often gets overlooked is that connection is not built through duty alone. You can be a good partner on paper and still miss what actually keeps the relationship alive. On the other side, a woman might be feeling something she struggles to explain. It's not always about big problems or major conflict. Sometimes it's simply the absence of closeness. The lack of those small, meaningful moments that make her feel desired, appreciated, and emotionally connected. And instead of expressing it clearly, she might stay quiet. Not because she doesn't care, but because she doesn't want to seem demanding, or because she's used to putting other things first. So what happens? Two people continue in the same relationship, doing what they believe is right, while a gap slowly forms between them. That gap isn't always visible. It doesn't always show up in arguments, but it shows up in energy, in how they interact, in how they feel around each other. And if it's left unaddressed, it doesn't just stay small, it grows. One of the biggest mistakes that quietly weakens connection in a relationship is rushing. Not just physically, but mentally. Moving too quickly from one stage to another without allowing any real build-up in between. And for many men, this happens without intention. It feels natural to move directly toward the end goal, to skip the slower moments and get straight to what seems like the main point. But that approach often creates the exact opposite effect of what's intended. Because connection doesn't respond well to being rushed. It responds to rhythm, to pacing, to gradual build-up. And this is where a lot of misunderstandings come in. The way men and women experience connection, especially in moments of closeness, can be very different. One side may be ready almost instantly, while the other needs time to feel fully engaged, fully present, and fully comfortable. When that time isn't given, something feels incomplete. It's not always obvious. There may not be complaints or direct confrontation, but internally the experience feels rushed, unfinished, or disconnected. And over time, that pattern starts to reduce the desire for those moments altogether. What most men don't realize is that the build-up is not separate from the experience, it is the experience. The moments before, the way you approach her, the energy you bring, the patience you show, all of that shapes how the entire interaction feels. When those parts are missing, it doesn't matter how things end, because the emotional connection was never fully created. On the other hand, when you slow things down, when you give space for anticipation to grow, something different happens. She becomes more present, more responsive, more connected to the moment. And that changes everything. Because when someone feels that gradual shift from calm to connection, from connection to deeper engagement, the experience becomes something they actually enjoy, not just something they go through. And that's the difference between routine and something that feels real. This is where most people completely overlook one of the most powerful parts of connection, the build-up that happens long before anything physical even begins. Because real anticipation doesn't start in a single moment. It starts in the small interactions that happen throughout the day. Think about it. If the only time there is any form of closeness or attention is when something is expected later, it begins to feel predictable, almost like a routine. And once something feels like a routine, it loses that sense of excitement and emotional pull. But when attention, warmth, and subtle connection are present at unexpected times, everything changes. A simple moment of closeness when she's not expecting it. A calm, intentional gesture. A brief touch that isn't rushed or forced. These things may seem small, but they create something much bigger beneath the surface. They begin to build anticipation naturally, without pressure. Because anticipation is not about intensity, it's about consistency. It's about creating a feeling that slowly grows over time. When you engage with her in a thoughtful, relaxed way throughout the day, you're not just being present, you're building a quiet form of connection that stays with her. And by the time you're together later, that connection isn't starting from zero, it's already there. This is the difference between something that feels sudden and something that feels desired. When anticipation is built properly, she becomes more aware of you, more responsive to your presence, more open to the moment. Not because you forced anything, but because the connection was already forming long before that moment arrived. And this doesn't require anything complicated. It's not about doing more. It's about being intentional with the small moments most people ignore. Because those small moments carry weight. They create a sense of emotional continuity, where she feels connected to you even outside of direct interaction. And when that happens, the experience becomes smoother, more natural, and far more enjoyable for both of you. That's the power of anticipation. It transforms ordinary moments into something that builds, something that grows, and something that lasts beyond a single interaction. This is where everything starts to deepen, because beyond timing and anticipation, there is something even more powerful that shapes how a woman responds in moments of closeness, and that is emotional safety. Not safety in the obvious sense, but the quiet feeling that she can relax, be present, and not feel pressure to perform or meet expectations. It's the kind of comfort that allows her to fully let go of tension, mentally and emotionally. And without that, no matter what you do, something will always feel slightly off. Because when a woman doesn't feel emotionally at ease, her mind stays active. She's thinking, analyzing, holding back. And when the mind is occupied like that, it becomes difficult for her to truly engage in the moment. She may be physically present, but not fully connected. This is something many men miss because it's not visible. It doesn't show up in obvious ways, but it shapes everything. Emotional safety is built through consistency, through how you treat her outside of those moments, through how you listen, how you respond, how you carry yourself. It's built through trust, through respect, through making her feel valued beyond just physical attention. And when that foundation is strong, something shifts. She becomes more open, more expressive, more willing to meet you at that level of connection without hesitation. Not because she feels obligated, but because she genuinely wants to. That's when the experience becomes mutual. Because real connection isn't one-sided. It's not something you try to create alone. It happens when both people feel comfortable enough to engage fully, without resistance. And here's the important part. Emotional safety doesn't come from big gestures. It comes from small, consistent signals. The way you speak to her. The way you respond when she opens up. the way you handle her vulnerability. All of these things tell her whether she can truly relax around you. And when she can, everything else flows naturally. Because connection, at its core, is not forced, it's allowed. This is where many men need to completely shift how they think about physical connection. Because it's not just about contact, it's about intention. The difference between a rushed, mechanical interaction and a meaningful one often comes down to how present you are in the moment. Most people underestimate how much awareness matters. It's easy to assume that simply being physically close is enough. But real connection isn't created through contact alone. It's created through how that contact is delivered. The pace, the pressure, the attention behind it, all of these details matter more than most realize. When movements are rushed or careless, it sends a subtle message. It feels like you're trying to get somewhere instead of appreciating the moment. And when that happens, it breaks the flow of connection. On the other hand, when your actions are calm and intentional, something different happens. She begins to relax. She becomes more aware of what's happening, more engaged, more responsive. Not because you're doing something complicated, but because you're actually present. This is what people mean when they talk about being in the moment. It's not about technique, it's about attention. When you slow down, when you pay attention to how she responds, when you adjust based on what you feel rather than what you assume, the entire experience becomes more natural. It stops feeling forced and starts feeling mutual. And this is where many men go wrong. They focus on what they think they should do, instead of paying attention to what's actually happening in front of them. But connection doesn't come from following a fixed pattern. It comes from awareness, from noticing small reactions, from adjusting your pace, from understanding that every person is different, and what works is not something you impose, but something you discover together. And when you approach it that way, it stops being about effort and starts becoming something that flows. Now, this is where you begin to apply everything in a practical way, because understanding the mindset is one thing, but knowing how to translate it into real moments is what actually changes the experience. And the first two areas you need to focus on are not about intensity, they're about connection and subtle sensitivity. The first area is one that many men overlook because it seems too simple, but simplicity is often where the real power is. This area is connected to closeness, reassurance, and emotional grounding. When you engage here with calm, steady intention, it naturally draws her closer to you. It creates a feeling of being held, of being secure, of being connected without pressure. And that's important. Because when a woman feels that kind of closeness, she doesn't resist. She leans in. She relaxes into the moment instead of holding back. It signals comfort without needing words, and it sets the tone for everything that follows. But here's the key. It has to be natural. Not forced, not exaggerated, just calm and present. When it's done right, it feels effortless, and that's what makes it effective. The second area builds on that connection, but introduces sensitivity. This is where awareness becomes even more important. Instead of focusing on speed or intensity, the focus shifts to gentle, thoughtful interaction. Slow movements, light contact, and paying attention to her reactions. This area responds strongly to subtlety. When you rush, it loses its effect. But when you take your time, when you allow the moment to unfold gradually, it creates a deeper level of engagement. She becomes more aware, more present, and more connected to what's happening. And this is where many men make a mistake. They assume more effort means better results. But in reality, less is often more when it's done with the right intention. Because connection is not built through force, it's built through awareness. And when you approach these first two areas with patience and presence, you create a foundation that makes everything else feel natural, not rushed, not forced, but genuinely connected. Now, this is where the experience starts to deepen in a noticeable way. Because once that foundation of comfort and trust is established, the next step is not to rush forward, but to expand the connection through awareness. This is where many men either elevate the moment or completely lose the rhythm they've built. The third area you need to understand is less about location and more about sensitivity and communication. It's an area that responds strongly, but only when approached with patience and attention. And what makes it different is that it requires you to actually listen, not just with your ears, but with your awareness. Every small reaction matters here. The way she responds, the way her body shifts, the way her breathing changes, all of these are signals. And when you pay attention to those signals, you begin to understand what feels right in the moment. Not based on assumptions, but based on real feedback. That's what creates a deeper connection. Because now, you're not just doing something, you're responding. You're adjusting. You're engaging in a way that feels mutual instead of one-sided. This is also where gentleness becomes essential. There's a tendency to think that more intensity creates a stronger reaction, but in reality, sensitivity responds best to care. When movements are controlled, when there's a sense of patience, it allows the moment to build naturally instead of being forced. And this is where communication, even without words, becomes powerful. She may guide you subtly. She may shift closer, move slightly, or respond in ways that show you what feels right. Your role is not to dominate the moment, but to stay aware of it. And when you do that, something changes. She feels understood without needing to explain everything. She feels like you're paying attention, not just going through a routine. And that feeling alone deepens the connection in a way that can't be created through speed or effort alone. Because at this stage, it's no longer just about connection. It's about harmony. Now, this is where everything reaches its most important point, because the final stage isn't about doing more, it's about understanding more. This is where awareness, patience, and communication come together in a way that either creates a truly fulfilling experience or breaks the connection completely if handled without care. The final area is the most sensitive, not just physically, but in terms of awareness. And because of that, it requires a completely different approach. You can't rush here. You can't assume. You can't rely on what you think should work. This is where listening becomes everything. And when we say listening, we're not just talking about words. We're talking about paying attention to her responses, her rhythm, her comfort level, and allowing her to guide the pace. Because every person is different, and what feels right for one may not feel right for another. That's why awareness is more valuable than any fixed method. This is also where many men make a critical mistake. They try to take control too quickly, assuming they already know what to do. But the truth is, connection at this level is not about control, it's about cooperation. It's about creating a space where both people are engaged, where there's a sense of mutual understanding, instead of one person leading and the other simply following. And when you approach it that way, something powerful happens. She feels comfortable expressing what she needs, whether directly or indirectly. She feels safe enough to respond honestly, without hesitation. And that honesty is what allows the experience to become genuinely satisfying, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Because when someone feels heard and understood in that moment, it creates a level of trust that goes beyond the surface. And that's what makes the difference. Not just reaching a point, but reaching it in a way that feels natural, respectful, and shared. Because when awareness is present at this level, the entire experience becomes something that both people actually enjoy, not something that feels one-sided or incomplete. When you step back and look at everything we've covered, one thing should stand out clearly. None of this is really about techniques. It's not about memorizing steps, following a script, or trying to perform in a certain way. Because the moment it becomes performance, it loses the very thing that makes it powerful. What actually creates a lasting connection is something much simpler, but much deeper. It's attention. It's presence. It's the willingness to slow down and truly understand the person you're with, instead of rushing through moments just to reach an outcome. And this is where most men still get it wrong, even after learning everything else. They try to apply what they've learned as a method, instead of allowing it to become a mindset. Because when your focus shifts from, what should I do next, to, what is she actually feeling right now, everything changes. You become more aware, more responsive, more connected to the moment instead of being stuck in your head. And that shift alone creates a completely different experience, one that feels natural, not forced. At the end of the day, real connection is not built through pressure. It's built through understanding, through patience, through creating an environment where both people feel comfortable enough to be present without holding back. And when that happens, you don't need to overthink anything. You don't need to chase a perfect outcome. because the experience becomes something you both move through together, not something you're trying to control. That's the real secret most men miss. It's not about doing more, it's about doing things differently, with intention, with awareness, and with respect. So if this opened your eyes to something new, I want to hear from you. What part stood out the most, and where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more content like this, make sure you're subscribed, because we're going deeper into connection, understanding, and relationships in ways most people don't talk about.